It is nothing more than archival ink. It's the same archival ink. It's just in distress colors. I've wanted more colors of this ink for a very long time, and here's why. Archival ink is an oil-based ink, and in the permanent ink world, there's a difference between oil and solvent, especially for what you want to use it for. Oil inks have a much better opacity when it comes to a dye, and it also plays much better with oxide, right? Whether we have distress oxide inks or sprays, that pigment that sits on the surface, I need an ink that I can stamp on top of it and really get great detail and color. So the archival ink is going to allow me to stamp on top of oxide, but the distress colors really kind of play nice with our backgrounds. Sure, you can use any color of archival ink with oxides, but I just love that the palette is just more harmonious to me, all right? They're available in 3 sets, 12 colors, warm, cool, and dirty, right? The great thing about, I think, this size is makers now, you know, that it's really tough with a standard ink pad. Just, I mean, gosh, everybody still wants mini oxides. That's a formulation issue, but I think that maker, because we want all the colors and we don't have all the space, they really kind of lend themselves to that. And I'll be honest, because I do a lot of big stamps, I'm like, am I gonna really like working with that? And this size, to me, works really well. It is in a black case instead of the white case. It is still a raised felt, and of course it fits in Ranger's archival tin. So that's the nice thing about this. You can use it on not only oxide, but you can use it as a watercolor ink. You can also use it on the new hardcore art panel, which I'll talk about. So it's a great ink to work for mixed media. The next thing in the world of distress are oxide sprays. Now, believe it or not, when the oxide pad, as soon as we come up with this formulation, I'm like, I can't wait for sprays. They're like, you were like a 5-year-old. You were never happy. It's like, I am happy, but wouldn't it be cool if we could spray this stuff too? So distress oxide is a fusion of dye and pigment. I think the art industry has really embraced this medium, which I'm so thankful for. The fact that it blends like butter, it just has this great creamy, dreamy look. It oxidizes with water to create cool effects. It stamps great. You can emboss with it. That's awesome. But in the mixed media world, if we're working on, you know, jelly plates and we're working on art journals and we're working on that type of larger surface, you know, an ink pad, you have to do a lot to get some color. And that's where the oxide sprays became, I think, so fun. The challenge, of course, was when it was a spray, we couldn't just take the ink and add water. Because if we did that, that would just oxidize right in the bottle. So the chemists needed to come up with some way to liquefy this medium without adding water to it. And that's what they've done. So the oxide spray, when you spray it out, you get beautiful coverage. You still get all of those great backgrounds without creating mud. And of course, when you wet it, it will oxidize. If you don't wet it, you're going to get a very kind of chalky look. You just won't get that same oxidation. It's almost like a spray paint. And I'll show you at the end of the demo when you work with it, that it's a nice product because I can use it just as a background colorant, or I have the option to spray it with water. Oh, here's a stencil. There we go. So this one is showing that I just sprayed oxide. Then I let that dry, took a stencil, sprayed water through the stencil, and that area oxidized even more. Okay? So just like the ink pads, it will continue to oxidize as you wet it. Another thing to keep in mind with this is use it in conjunction with spray stain. Right? If you use it with inks, like on this one, this is an oxide spray, but this yellow, that's just a distress spray stain. If you use it in conjunction with just dyes, you get a lot more kind of that separate, almost like a mixative, not really, but you just get where those pigments kind of stay where they want and you get these concentration of dyes. So if you're doing a lot of demos, I mean, it's very important after any trade show with something new. Everyone's excited about the toys. Don't forget the toy box, right? Don't forget all that other stuff because then they just totally shift their attention away from everything else. And new products are always designed to work with what they have, okay? So the oxide sprays, 12 colors right now, but I do understand that they're already going to be working on the rest of the palette, which was very, very exciting. Yeah, and they're like, we need you to break down the colors in March. I love you guys. Yes?
How are the sprayers working? Are you having any problem with them plugging up?
Not at all, because it's not a mica-based mineral, so so the components of that just goes. The one thing that I've learned when I'm working with it, and that's what they put on the label, is when you mix it, they're talking about like a side to side. I don't really have time for that, so I leave all the tops off of mine, and I just wrap it in a paper towel so I can really shake it up. But it mixes very, very quickly, okay, because it's not that heavy particle of a mica. Yeah, it's a totally different, it's like a, I don't know, titanium dioxide or something. I have no idea what that is, but yeah, it mixes up very, very quickly. All right, so oxide, archival, Now we move on to the world of alcohol ink. Totally different category, but very, very cool. And I think what makes it really exciting is, let's face it, alcohol inks have been just crazy. Yeah, people are doing so many things with alcohol inks, and it's been around with Ranger, my gosh, I think probably at least 10 years. And alcohol inks in the industry, other brands have been around even longer. And alcohol inks are basically just a solvent-based translucent dye. Okay, we've been playing with alcohol inks and metallic mixatives. Metallic mixatives are a solvent pigment. And when you use the alcohol inks with mixatives, we can create kind of this separation, these agates, this polished stone, very, very cool effects. But the new alcohol pearls, that's a whole different animal. And I think the inspiration for the pearls, well, I know the inspiration for the pearls, was really because of what we were able to do with an oxide. The ability to take a dye and a pigment and have them coexist, that's what they did with the pearls. They were able to take the solvent dye, but get a pigment to attach itself to that dye. You'll see on the alcohol pearls that each color has a coordinating color of pearl. So it's not like we just added white pearl. It has a color of pearl that coordinates with the ink. And when you use it, it mixes up just like that. So it's not like a mixative where you had to shake it and shake it and shake it and shake it, because it is not that. It's not just pigment and solvent. As soon as you shake this up, that pearl, my voice, that pearl becomes fused to the dye right away. So when I work with these, especially if you have the alcohol storage tin, one thing that I find even quicker is I now store my tin like this. Because if your pigment can settle on this side of the bottle, you can literally just pick it up, give it a quick shake and go, versus trying to get all of that to mix up. All right? Now the pearls, what I want to talk about is that when you apply them, they go onto a surface with a pearlescent sheen. And I'll pass this around so you can feel it. It has no texture like a mixative would. Okay? It's absolutely freaking beautiful. These are all the colors, so you can see. And I even went crazy with the color palette. I wanted it just to be totally different, standalone. So we have like, deception and villainous and smolder and mineral and enchanted and alchemy and sublime and envy and tranquil. Just because I think that these all have a feel, and you can see how beautiful and shimmery these are. And here's the big difference. This is the pearl mixative, because of course right away in Facebook Live it's like, bink, I have pearl mixative. What's the difference? Why are you going to try to sell me something I can already make? I'm like, I thought the same thing. I'm like, dude, I can make my own. I have pearl mixative. Remember, mixative is just a pigment with that solvent. Pigment always dominates dye. So if you use alcohol ink with a mixative, no matter how many layers of color, remember that mixative is always going to rise to the surface. That's what it's designed to do. And this is a beautiful pearly background. But you can see when the light hits it, it's white. It whites it out with pearl. This is a pearl alcohol ink. So you can see when the light hits it, you still get that shimmer of that same color. You don't get a whiteout. And when you use these together, you don't get separation. So if I use my alcohol pearl with my alcohol inks, these two will not separate. They will flow together to become a whole new color, which is, I know, it's like, and so I can still use a pearl with a mixative, and that mixative will be separate from the pearl. It's a pearlized ink. So it's not an ink, it's not a mixative. It's like a whole new ingredient, a whole new thing. It's just the same way everybody was with this is now in the alcohol ink world, they're going to be like that with this, because it's absolutely crazy how it works. Now, before I show you how it works, I'll talk about substrates real quick before they tell me I have 2 minutes left. Anytime we have new things, to have new substrates, new consumables is like magic to a retailer. 3 things really important. One was a black matte cardstock. Now, I don't really use black with alcohol ink. Sharon Harris, who does the painting, this is something she really, really wanted. But because they wanted to do black, I wanted to pick the cardstock because I love black paper for matting, for putting a mat behind a card, for using it with ideology. And so the paper I wanted was really, really important. This is the black mat. You should feel it. It feels like rubber or suede. It is a super thick cardstock. So it will hold up to alcohol painting, to printing with paint, to use it with the oxide sprays. So you can use it with a lot of other things other than alcohol ink, but it is inkable. The other one is a brushed silver cardstock. Now the brushed silver, this is what it looks like. It's just a brushed metallic cardstock. Most metallics that I have in the line are just kind of a foiled paper that creates that reflection, or a very bright metallic printing. This, I wanted something that was just a little bit more subdued. So if I wanted to add ink on it, it would give it just a really subtle metallic finish. But the one that's getting everyone just
yeah.
crazy. Yes, I know, it's weird. Everyone's like, yep, shut up, Tim, and just get on to the sparklies.
I was thinking it.
This is Silver Sparkle. And Silver Sparkle is a sparkly cardstock. This was Ideology Deco Sheet. Okay, this is something that I had in the line for quite a while. We've since retired this, but this is that vinyl that you could ink and you could peel and stick. And I always thought this was really sparkly and smooth until we found this, which is a cardstock. Okay, so when you ink it, you don't have to worry about ink kind of bleeding through it. It inks absolutely unbelievably amazing, and neither one of these products contain glitter. Okay, this is a printed process, so none of this is going to erode or come off. When you ink this, it will ink backgrounds. Let's see, where are all the backgrounds? This one's embossed. Where are some of those drippy ones? Here we go. You can see that these backgrounds, once you add the color, this is alcohol ink. So this is not alcohol pearl on there. This is just using alcohol inks. You could use pearl, but
I don't have enough space in my warehouse to have enough of that.
I know.
That's incredible.
And the weight of it is just, it's really unbelievable. And even more important, it's totally embossable. It won't crack when you run it through an embossing folder. And this is a 3D folder.
No, it's smooth.
Yeah, it has totally smooth finish. Yeah, when you feel it, has no texture to it. But it's got has a great weight to it. So when you emboss it, yeah, it won't break through the embossing folder.
That's amazing.
So you can die cut it, emboss it, punch it, do all of that. And I think what was also interesting to me, because I've used this before, I could ink it, but once you ink it, it's inked. It doesn't play, it doesn't move. This, as you can see, has that same play that kind of like Yupo does, where you can ink it, and when you put blending solution, it will move within that sparkly substrate. So that was really cool.
So is that what gave it the movement, was you poured alcohol ink on after? Just like...
Yes, I inked it. Yeah,
Okay.
I did the panels.
Okay.
Same way. So I'll talk about these panels and then I'll show you the drippage.
What is that
So,
paper called?
Silver Sparkle.
Silver Sparkle.
Yeah, and the alcohol ink cardstock. So in addition to our papers, we definitely listen to the art market. We have a lot of mixed media artists that are doing fine art with alcohol inks. They're painting, they're doing cool backgrounds, and as much as they love Yupo, after they make something, they still need to mat it, they need to frame it, and they're like, we need a substrate. Well, Ranger also goes to the art show, and we were across from Masterpiece, who does canvas board for the art world, and he had this material and he brought it over to us. He's like, I've got this board that has this coating that painters don't like to paint on, but I think your inks might work on this. And he brought it over, and Alan started working with him, and they developed this partnership to release hardcore art panels. And these are wood, so this is not chipboard. You can't die cut this. Like, if you're going to cut it, you're going to use a saw. But it's actually fused with kind of a vinyl-like material. It's not peel and stick. It's part of the board. It's the same on both sides. But you can see when you work on this, it has that same kind of playtime like Yupo. I'm going to pass it on so you can feel it. It's not Yupo. It has a little bit of a texture to it. But what I love is that I can ink it, I can do blending solution, I can do alcohol lift ink on there, I can stamp with archival ink on there, but it's an art panel. It's a board. It's something that once you use it, you can just hang it on the wall, use a ideology clip, whatever you want. And these are available in 4x4 multi-pack panels, 5x7 multi-pack panels, and then the assortment pack, which now there's only one left in here, but because you know me, I just rip it apart. But there's a rectangular assortment pack and a square assortment pack where you get just 3 different sizes to play with. But the substrate is very, very cool because it doesn't warp the board. You can emboss on this. It doesn't melt that away. I love how crisp I was able to stamp with archival. I didn't think it would lift. So this was the first board that I did when I was playing around with it at home. And I inked it, just did kind of my normal inking, just to see like how much would it take. And I'm like, oh God, this is disgusting. So I picked up the panel, took my blending solution, just started doing this, and this happened. And I'm like, technique. And then before you know it, I picked up every single thing that I inked and did exactly the same thing. So this is nothing more than alcohol ink. Just shake on there, let it dry. So it's just going to look splotchy like that.
Okay.
Pick it up, and blending solution. So this is like the blended version of that, really. But it's crazy because I wouldn't think to do that, you know? And most, like if you told me to paint that, there's no way I could do that. I couldn't pick up a brush and create that background. It would be mucky. But I can certainly drip as many colors as I want. And it doesn't matter what palette you use. But I really appreciate the fact that this surface was as playful, as forgiving as Yupo. It just kind of gave us another thing to work with. So, real quick, let's see, what time is it? Good, we got time, people. Unless you have someplace to be. So we'll talk about just oxide spray. Just going to shake this up. It's going to go onto a background. I think what I'm most excited about, especially this release, and I think as retailers it's the same thing. Sometimes when we have just one new product, you really kind of focus people's attention away from something else. Like if you have just new alcohol ink, then they're like, oh, you know, we're not going to use oxide in because we're into this. Or if you have just new oxide, they're not using this. So having something new in different categories is going to bring freshness to a little bit of everything. That's what I like. So on our oxide spray, I'll do a little bit of that, a little bit of that. Let's throw in some, let's just take colors that you would never want to put together. Why not?
There's no brown in there.
Oh, it probably will be. I'm looking at what I'm choosing. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I might hit brown. I don't know. But what's interesting about this, you can see that it goes on as that wonderful pigment, but there is a serious concentration of dye as well. But as far as layering, I can still put pink over the top of things. I probably don't need this pistachio, but I'm going to go in with it anyway. Let me grab a stain. Okay? Because I do think that when we add a little bit of that dye, that's going to kind of bring that on. I told you, I'm going to get some brown. I hope. I hope. This has a really crazy way of layering this. Let me get this out of your way. Okay. One thing to know about a media mat, though, if you're working on this media mat is going to allow us to print, unlike if you had a craft mat here, right? So this beautiful goodness, you can pick this up and you can spray a piece of paper and lay it down and you could transfer that color onto watercolor. I would suggest wetting the paper first and then it just like sucks right up into the paper versus dry. Another thing to keep in mind whenever you're doing color layering is to add water at different times. It's going to do different things, right? Especially with oxide. If we add it while it's wet, it's going to blend all of our colors. If we dry a little bit and then just keep adding water, it's going to start reacting through those layers. Let me move it out of the sludge. Let me just start. Oh, maybe that was an ink pad. There was a bottle. Oh. That's how I lose things. Like, where's my blending tool? Threw it away. Roll off the table. So this one, I'm just going to keep adding some. I told you I'd get some brown. I knew by the time I was doing orange and green.
Now it's coming at Tim Tag.
You're going in there. Yeah. But there's a little pink. I know. It's like embracing that little bit of pink. Here's what I find really interesting about this one. Is if I was going to do this with an ink pad, it would have taken a lot of blending, a lot of layers to get this much color. And I really appreciate just getting the feedback from makers, from people that are doing things. And they said, you know, it'd be really great because I want to work in my journal, or I want to do larger panels, or I want to work on fabric. You know, we are always striving to have different delivery systems for a great medium. And that delivery system is just how that product can be kind of dispensed onto a background. To do all of this just with an ink pad, you could achieve that, but that would just be like blending, wetting, and just to build that up. And you saw in the spray, and that right there, that's a whole lot of magic. It's not going to happen here because I'm going to get rid of it, but if I was home, I would definitely print into that. So cleanup for oxide, nothing more than just water. If you don't want to clean all of that up, of course, you can use a splat box. That makes it easy, but Media Mat's just going to clean that right off. So let's do alcohol ink real quick, just so you can see it. It's kind of cool just to visually see it. I'm going to flip it on the back of Yupo. So the alcohol pearls, as I mentioned, it's just going to be a pearlescent ink. You do a lot with alcohol ink on jelly plate, right? Wow, that's wild. I need to get into that. That's kind of my thing that I want to really try this year.
Jelly plate?
Never played before.
You're going to get hooked.
Ever, never.
You dream about it at night.
Yeah, I have them. They were great enough to send it, but it's like, I don't know. It looks really cool. It just looks like you kind of get what you get and you don't throw a fit, and I love that.
You can use all kinds of things on the jelly plate that you don't think you can. Watercolors.
Yeah, just seems...
Resist the urge to clean in between making a print, and you get the debris that you pick up, and it creates a look I think you'll enjoy.
Little nuggety bits? Yeah, I would like that. I would definitely like that. So here I'm just showing that just by dripping this on, and I'll see, let me get a different color. Maybe I'll do Celestial. That one showed up really good on the earlier one. I just want you to see that when you put the ink directly onto the surface, you're going to get almost like, you're going to see the pearl almost like sizzle. Can you see that little pearl? Just like because that pearl is part of the ink. And even if I go over it with, oh, sorry, right in front of that camera.
That's okay.
Even if I go in with some blending solution, you can see that pearl is just, it's all staying together. It's not pushing to the side like a mixative. And it's really awesome, especially if you're an alcohol ink user, a lover of the inks. The fact that we now can go in, I know, it's like I am an alcohol ink user. I must use
There are
that.
worse things to be addicted to.
I know.
Yeah, the camera's not picking up that little sizzle, but that's pretty
I'll add some more.
pretty
I know, we can
awesome,
see
right?
We
Yeah.
can see the sizzle. But
I'll add some more. Oh, the camera's not
look at the
picking it up?
blue and the green going
Yeah.
together.
Let's go and I'll add a little bit more here. See what happens.
Oh, oh my
yeah,
gosh.
there it is.
I don't know.
It's just really cool. It's kind of crazy, but you can see where I go in with the ink. The ink and
like
the pearl.
Pop Rocks.
That pearl, see how it's starting to go into that ink right there? I haven't really mixed it, but you can see how that pearl is actually taking over that wild plum. And that was just alcohol ink. So again, it's not working like a mixative. It's not staying away. It's becoming one. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, I love the looks of that. But yeah, I would just dry it and then just kind of just see what you get.
We still have like 4 or 5 more minutes, but I just
Of
want to
course.
thank everyone for coming
Thank
this
you.
morning.
Thank you,
And
Al.
I want to thank Tim and all the other designers for being here because it's it makes for a
Early
long
morning.
day when they start early. So thank you.
Thank you.
you.
We appreciate being invited.
It's fun. But
It's almost
yeah.
like your own pool.
It's just kind of cool. But I will say on this one, like to do that effect, let the background dry and then do the drift. Because this, I mean, I like this, but this is kind of a bit muddy. But it's mudding because the inks weren't dry when I did the blending solution. But I wanted to see what happens.
I did not. Thank you.
I just react before I can ask the question. If I'm saying what if, I've just done it already.
It's weird.
I'm like,
Oh, there you go.
I've answered
There's
the
a little bit
question
of that
before I even
sizzle.
asked
You can see it.
Get
Because
it?
you never know.
There is a little bit of sizzle if you get
See it?
close. Yeah.
Right.
It's very. I can't believe how this ink, like how fine that pearl is. Because that's the first thing I thought. I'm like, okay, well, it's like a mixative. It's that bigger pigment. And
You know what I think is going to happen? People are going to get addicted to watching that
I know.
yeah.
sizzle happen.
I know. Yeah, especially
And it's all about
painters that
using it
kind of
up.
like do that line like with a brush and then kind of see that dance. Is it the colorful artist or the lady from Ireland? I think it's a colorful artist. If you follow her on Instagram, she just does beautiful circular alcohol paintings, and she was, playing around with mixing micas and glitters. And I messaged her. I'm like, you are going to be so happy because watching that kind of movement is very, very cool to see that in the background. But even this kind of what it's doing on its own just by sitting there, it's kind of actually is looking nice again. First it looked a little
There's
muddy,
nothing
but
wrong with that.
yeah, now I'm kind of good. I'll just like crop that and yeah, we're done. I just think that's really, really cool. Because as we know, the longer you can let something dry, you can come back to it
Yeah.
and it's, pretty magical. But I do want to dry it so you can see
really
it.
sizzling, yeah.
Oh yeah, you'll see the pearl. Remember, the pearl always pearlizes when it's dry. Right now, it's part of the ink.
Unbelievable. So now you were saying about this on black.
Because remember, this isn't a mixative.
Right.
So you would think, oh, it's got pigment, it would be opaque. Nope. If you put this on black, it's black paper.
Okay.
Yeah, so the only way to really get this to still show is to use snowcap mixative.
Okay.
Yeah, you still have to use snowcap with this because it's weird. You just know what you know. If you're using ink, you're like, oh, it's got a pigment in it. I can just put it right on there and it's going to show up. I thought the same thing, and I put it on and
Disappeared.
nothing. Yeah,
Thank you, Tim.
you're very welcome. Thanks. But look at that sheen. Holy crow.
See, I don't even like glitter, and I think that is going to be my new favorite thing.
This?
Yes.
Yeah,
I don't like glitter.
but that's also why I didn't call it glitter because to me it just has a sparkle.
It's just fabulous.
And you could
Wow.
get it very grungy. I mean, I didn't bring my pieces at home, but obviously you know my palette of
Right,
choice.
right.
And I was seeing what could it look like with pitch black and mushroom and brown, and it was very, very cool.
Yeah, I
It
think
looked
that's-
super awesome, and to be able to stamp on it, I just loved it.
right.
I thought it was very cool.
And
So
then you can die cut it.
yeah. Yeah, and die cut it. Just I love that, and I was really surprised as to how much ink it could take. I didn't even bleed through the back. I mean, this was a ton of ink and ton of blending solution. I thought for sure like, oh, it's going to get sucked through this, but it didn't. No, pretty great.
That's going to be an incredible
Hey, ladies,
thing to
thanks
have.
for tuning in.
It was awesome.
So you know, a lot of people use alcohol ink on clear things like
Yes.
the cover a clear rhinestone.
Yes.
What if we use the pearl on that? Would it turn that rhinestone where you wouldn't be able to see the.
No, because it's not opaque. It's still translucent. It's just going to give it that
Oh, your badge?
luster,
A little bit of a shimmer on top of
almost
it.
opalescent,
Okay.
right? So you'd still get that great